Are you looking for a blueprint to help you find your lane in success? There is no one blueprint, and everyone's journey is different. But by listening to the stories of others, you can and will find your own lane. This podcast is dedicated to helping you find your unique version of success and will arm you with enough information that you can cherry pick what works for you. You'll hear interviews of some of your favorite people and learn from their expertise in their respected fields. Everyone has the ability to be successful, and your host, Cloé Luv, will show you how. This is the Committed to Success podcast.
Hello, my Clovers, and welcome to another episode of Committed to Success with your host, Cloé Luv. Today, we have an amazing guest, Kevin Price, that will come on in the second segment. But as you know, I got to have my Cloé time with you guys and just tell you guys what I'm feeling, what's on my mind, and have some one-on-one conversation with you. So I had a conversation about mindset versus perspective, right? So your mindset, people are telling you like, hey, you got to have a strong and powerful mind. You got to be able to manifest things. You got to be able to be strong and diligent in what you're putting out there, right? But if your perspective is warped, then your mindset will also be warped. So the word mindset is very tricky because it can mean good or bad, but the way that people use it, they generally think it's just a good thing. Like get your mindset together, but it's have a positive mindset. But even the word positive can be tricky because positive and negative is influential by your environment, right? Nature versus nurture. You can think that something is negative, such as money, rich people, material things, or you could think that that's something's positive. And either way that you think can make you act in a way that is not natural in the sense of like showing up, living, being happy in your natural presence because of what your idea or what you have attached to that thought. Both of them are mindset. And if it goes to extreme on each side, neither one serves you. Perspective is what loops everything together. Perspective is what gives you the notion of what this actually means. It breaks down the definition word by word in a sentence so that you can authentically, naturally, and in the best way apply the information, digest it, and execute it, right? Knowledge is, what real knowledge is to read something, get information, right? To have tools and stuff, and to create an original thought from what you read. It's not reciting or memorization. What your knowledge is and what true knowledge is to be able to create original thoughts from things that you've learned and that you've experienced. That is real knowledge. When we talk about what knowledge is knowledge is what your knowledge is true to me, right? So if that's knowledge to you because that's your output of your original thought, does that necessarily mean that it's my knowledge? Right? Is knowledge something that is definitive? Is it something that can change? Is it something that is fact? Or is it interchangeable depending on the person that's applying it or that is digesting it or that is putting it out, right? These are all things that we got to think about when we're having conversations with people, when we're taking advice from people, when we're giving people advice. Have we done the work to figure out our perspective? And when we figure out that perspective, have we done the work to figure out why our perspective is the way that it is? These are all thought-provoking questions, you know. My husband has a saying, he'd rather ask the good question and deal with the bad answer than not know. There's no such thing as a bad answer, only the truth. And the truth will help you navigate the way that you need to in order to exist here freely. So Clovers, I hope that, you guys pull some jewels, you guys pull some information, or that it got your mind going with what perspective versus mindset is. And I'll be right back after this commercial break. Welcome to another episode of Committed to Success. Today we have one of my good friends, Kevin Price, who is the host of The Price of business talk and radio show, an award-winning journalist, a columnist, and an author. Welcome, Kevin.
Good to be with you.
How are you feeling today?
I am doing A-OK. How about you?
I'm doing good. You know, it's always a good time when we get together and we get to talk and chat. We always have amazing conversations. So I'm excited about that and I'm happy about that.
Good. Me too.
So tell the people a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, I have been on in media for decades, since the early '90s, and have had this show since 2001. In fact, I was reading an article on the history of podcasting, and it said that the term was first used, podcasting, in 2004. This show started in The Price of Business started in 2001. And it's funny when you talk to people now, they're always talking about being on my podcast, my pocket. Well, I'm still in markets coast to coast. I mean, I'm Washington, D.C. to Washington State. But, all of a sudden it's all about the podcast. But we're also podcasted. We're on every single major platform. And I worked many years in politics and public policy. And my radio show initially was a political show, but around 2001, we changed the name, the format, and everything, and it became primarily a business show. And you can't talk about business without also talking about politics, obviously.
Absolutely.
So we talk about that subject as well. I have a lot of kids. I have grandkids. I live in Houston, but I like to travel a lot. I feel like a hostage to COVID, like a lot of other people. I look forward to traveling more. But yeah, I enjoy what I do. And I have, I think, a unique story with the history of my family of origin with money. Their issues around money profoundly impacted my issues around money. And, it's kind of like you talk to therapists. My wife is a therapist, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And she likes to say, people become therapists because their lives were messed up. And, and so they were looking for answers for the problems they had, and they ended up becoming psychology or in her case, social work. Social work majors. Well, I'm the money guy. I host the business show because I had so much chaos and insanity about money my whole life, going back to my family of origins, looking for answers. And unfortunately, people think, oh, he's the answer guy. No, I'm the questioning guy. I'm trying to get answers. But that's a little bit about my story. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about my book at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It kind of gives a little context.
Yeah. And I always love the points that you make. The best way to go into business is going into it authentically, like trying to solve a problem for yourself. Then you realize there's a market for that because there are people like you committed to success. This podcast is because the journey is hard, right? People think that you just show up and it's easy. The journey is hard and people need support. They need answers. And I got questions. So I bring people like yourself up there and other great people that I have to ask those questions and to get that feedback from myself and my audience. So I'm so really happy that you said that because you hit the nail right on the head when it comes to why people do what they do and the best way to serve themselves while serving others.
Yeah.
What is your definition of success?
Yeah, I think that's evolved, over time. For most of my stressed out life as an adult, it was a lot of, he with the most toys wins, old definition, it's measured in amount of money. It was measured in amount of money, amount of stuff, accolades, accomplishments, and I'm certainly grateful for the awards I've received and the status of things in my media, and the financial awards have been nice as well. But honestly, the older I get, the more the idea of success aligns with contentment.
Yes.
Contentment, and you said something that was interesting about how hard it is for most people, or a lot of people in business. Mostly it's because most people don't want to accept reality. And so They don't want to love what is. That was the Roman Stoics, the Stoic philosophers used to have this saying, amor fatis, which is Latin for love what is. And we don't like that. We want to be demigods and try to change things to be according to our likes, and instead of that, we should really be about loving what is. What is my reality? What am I dealing with? How can I reframe my thinking? And so and a lot of it is with age. I'm at a point now chronologically where I'm more aware of the fact that life is more finite than when I first got in business in my 20s as a young man. And more it's about how do I relax and how do I enjoy life and how do I make contributions that are lasting, which is why my kids and grandkids are really important in that respect. And so success is very measured in different ways, but for me, it has a lot to do with contentment. And I like the word contentment over happiness. Happiness is very volatile. It's very fleeting. This is here now. I think the pursuit of happiness has made a lot of people miserable. And I like to pursue contentment. I like to pursue and make the most of the ride, even if it wasn't the ride I chose.
That was just so much like great information. And to be clear, you're not saying that if you're built this hand where you grew up poor, which we'll talk about as well, that you have to stay poor. That's not what you're saying. You're saying be aware of what the situation is so that you can move forward into making your reality better.
Yeah. Yeah, and really challenge what, so people who are raised in poverty. In my case, I was raised, I would say low middle class was a better, I never was hungry, never saw a utility go off. My parents were Great Depression children. They were raised in the Great Depression. And so I heard constant stories growing up of an existential crisis. And when something did happen that was disrupted financially, they would go to the worst case scenario and plan doom and gloom. And so the story I heard did not match reality. But when you're little and you hear that story constantly, you begin to develop a pair of eyes that sees everything through that catastrophizing. You begin to catastrophize very easily. But I challenge people, it isn't just going from poverty to not being poor. It goes from being discontent to being content.
Yes.
And so there's no amount of money that will pay. There's no amount of money that will pay for contentment. There's no amount of money.
That's such a great perspective. Perspective is so important when it comes to that mindset and making those reality changes. I'm so glad that you said that. Tell us, what is the price of business and how do you think that affects your brand integrity?
So the Price of Business is one of the longest running business shows in the country. It's in its 21st year. And it is a multimedia platform. We've got 13 different websites with different focuses. We're about to add additional ones. We collaborate with everyone from Amazon Prime Audible, that is, with Apple podcast, with you name it, so many. I can't even keep track of the platforms. And we'll get an email from someone and they say, "Hey, why aren't you on this platform?" Well, sure enough, we are on that platform. And why you're not finding it, I'm not sure, because everyone else is. And so it's amazing to me how big of a reach we've been able to have. I think having a background in politics, my show is much more heavily oriented towards politics. More with time, I'm much more interested in business. And I think maintaining balance, I think personal imbalance makes us unhappy. And so we do a lot of lifestyle-oriented type programming. We include conversations about charities. We include conversations about leaving a lasting effect, a lasting impact, and really being a more holistic view of success and happiness, and not cliche-ish, not, not infomercials at 2 a.m. that are trying to drive you to hurry up and make a much money because you can't sleep. That's why you're up at 2 a.m. watching that infomercial. We try to take a different approach. And unlike a lot of the business people out there, we are very interested in small and medium businesses, which is the vast majority of businesses out there. In my opinion, the majority of media out there is really geared towards the mega corporations and the highest offices in business. And we have no problem with them. I interview them. I have several interviews with billionaires and
yes, you have.
From Fortune 500 companies. I like them, but I really feel like we're trying to help those who are small to medium-sized business reach their goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my interview with you. It was different from the other interviews that I was doing. And I remember us having that conversation after and how much I enjoyed it because we spoke from a perspective of not selling a product or selling, how great what we're doing is, but real organic conversation about what the process is, what this, what the things or my views and my philosophies can do to help people, how it helps people, what those philosophies are. And I really enjoyed it. And it was very inspirational. It made me want to do more press because you didn't know it at that time, but I was like over pressed at that time. I didn't like it. I was like, this is just like, I didn't get that. And you came right in that nick of time for me to like really feel what it feels like to have a great interview and kind of like a fireside chat way, without it being interviewee. So I really love that. And, it also inspires me. Like, this is how I want to show up as well. I don't want to be high at 5. There's nothing wrong with that. But I want to ask those questions. I want to show those parts of people's personality when it comes to business so that it can be relatable. And, just like you said, the majority of businesses are small to medium businesses that make up the market. So it's really amazing that you focus on that and that you bring that political aspect in on it. I love that. I also have my MPA, my first master's is in public administration. So I feel like that's why I'm like so drawn to your brand. And I just love everything you do because it aligns well. And I love the branding that you guys did on the wordplay of the last name, The Price of Business, Kevin Price. Yes. I just think that is so cool.
That was a listener. That was my show was the Houston Business Show back at the time. I was only in one market, and a listener said, "Hey, you ought to call your show The Price of Business." And well, that is a good idea. So led to
so cool. Coming from a music background and always wishing that I could like rap with the double entendres, I appreciated that so much. I thought that was so cool.
The Duke of Earl, that was already taken, so I had to be The Price of Business. Is this what it came down to? And I really liked your question about integrity because I think most people in business, particularly small and medium-sized business, the temptation is to be only about your service or about your product. And there's both good sides to that. Yeah, we want the best for our customers. And there's also like, we don't really see the larger context. Questions like brand integrity, like you asked, really makes, again, a more holistic view about what your business is about. What values do you have? What do you want to see happen as a result of your in my case, media? And so I like that question. It's a good one.
Thank you. Speaking of questions,
I'll probably steal it, but I won't give credit in advance.
Well, you've inspired me.
I already warned you.
Inspire you for some new questions as well. So that's how we work, right? But
right, there you go.
Absolutely. But speaking of questions, you always have such great information and perspective, and you ask the great questions in life. Give us an overview on your book and, making rich, like how do these like making you rich books work for you or not work for you? And like, what makes yours different? Can we get an overview of that?
Yeah, I think almost all the literature. I've had Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, on my show many times. I've had a lot of really some of the most important people in the new rich space on my program over the years. And they all have one thing in common, and there's nothing wrong with it. But they all have one thing in common, which is a presumption that the reader can do what their books say they can do. And what I mean is that they mentally, emotionally, spiritually can do those things. And that's a big assumption to make. And so my book is made for the person who isn't there yet. They would love to be able to pick up Rich Dad, Poor Dad and go from employee to self-employed to business owner to investor, the chain you want to go. He would love to, they would love to be able to do that, but they're not capable of doing that yet. And it isn't a question of intelligence. It's a question of upbringing, exposure, their neighborhood, their culture, sometimes even their religion. There's all kinds of factors that undermine their ability to do that. So my book really focuses on the luggage most people carry before they can really launch into business. And so I was raised in a household where I was always told that rich people rip people off. And I was told that, unless you're working, unless there's a direct relationship between your work and your money earned, you are cheating people and you're not behaving properly, which automatically cuts you off from investor or business owner. I mean, it automatically cuts you off. And so, 90% of the population makes 10% of the money. It's those people who are self-employed and employed. I'm being stuck in that category because of the language I heard growing up. And so I identified really a couple dozen in the end, barriers that we're all carrying, luggage we're all carrying. Some of us go to religious churches and other institutions that really praise poverty, and find nobility in poverty. Well, it's hard to be financially successful if you think there's nobility in poverty, or the inverse of that being you're bad because you're not poor. And so we carry all of these things, and my book identifies those. I talk about a lot of my own personal struggles in that area, and the things I have had to do to overcome those. And really, a great example was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I've read that book not Rich Dad, Poor Dad, 4-Hour Work Week. I did read Rich Dad, Poor Dad several times, but particularly 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I read that several times. First time I said, this is like pure fiction. Only crazy people do stuff like this, Then I read it the second time, and it's like, well, there is some things here that might work. And then I began to do journaling. And journaling, talking about the Stoics again, the Stoics use journaling as a powerful tool of really self-help and meditation and to address weaknesses that they had in themselves. They wrote through those problems. They wrote through those challenges. I began to challenge my assumptions. Those challenges eventually became part of how to make new rich books work for you. And as I wrote through them, I finally got to the point where, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try some of that. I went into it, had some success, and I liked the success, but in the end I said, it didn't really meet what I expected it to do. It didn't do what the back book cover said it would do. And then finally I tried it after more work, and I said, I'm going to take reckless abandonment, and I'm going to assume Tim Ferriss is correct. And I jumped in it entirely. And as a result, I had reduced my work time from around 60 hours a week to around 10 hours a week.
Oh.
In about 60 days. And my income went up over 20% my first year. And so it worked. And it was that reckless abandonment of assuming he's right and my luggage is wrong. And this book, my book, I think will help people best track through that luggage. Will help them dismiss the assumptions that they have been.
Sorry, your internet is fading out.
Really holding them back. And it's with vulnerability. I'm very honest, as you hear in this interview. Very honest. Okay, Ursula, do you hear me now?
So when you got to my blog, it chipped out, but I hear you now.
You can hear me now. Sorry about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, we've had fun. This has been the funnest part, is trying to communicate with you with our technology, maybe my technology. But and so, as you know, I've been very vulnerable, and there's something about my shortcomings, my struggles, how hard it's been, the fear and loathing around money that I was raised around, and it's something about hearing someone else being honest about their experience that helps them be honest about their experience, which I think really leads to meeting your financial objectives. And it's still a struggle. I've got all kinds of beliefs that I got. What happens is it's kind of like an attic. The mind is like an attic full of boxes that we're trying to get rid of, boxes about who we are, boxes about what money is, boxes about success, and as you remove some boxes, as you're getting better, oh, look, more boxes. And so, I'll be removing boxes, I think, until I'm done, which means I'll be done.
Yeah. I truly love that. And I was going to ask you, with all these Thinking Rich books out there, why did you feel the need to add another one? What was that factor, that moment when you were like, no, I got to do this?
I wasn't finding any that addressed why those books were not working.
Love it.
So those books, like Tim Ferriss' book, I think has 5 million sold. I guarantee you it didn't produce 5 million millionaires.
Yeah, I love it. I love that your book is like, when you're in college, there's a prerequisite that gets you ready to take that course. So your book is that prerequisite that makes you prepare you for the information and how to digest that and how to put that into action. And that's so important. I love that you filled that space, because I've said this many times, people tell you mindset, but what does that mean? Or people tell you to manifest, but how do I do it? Like, they're telling you to take these steps, but no one's preparing you for the things of how to do it, or what's even blocking you, or why, you're manifesting certain things because your perspective is warped. So I love that you address that, because I always talk about mindset versus perspective. And I feel like when people understand how important perspective is and the things that influence it, then we can start talking about mindset. So I love that your book is the prerequisite, that it addresses those things and equips people with what they need to be able to digest it and to execute them.
Yeah, I've called it, it's a little presumptuous maybe, but I call it the missing link in new rich literature. It's that.
Yeah, I don't think it's presumptuous at all. I think it's right on point.
And I noticed you were talking about manifesting, but you see, and I don't talk about that in this book. I probably will in a future book, but we get so hyper positive, we're poised for failure.
Yeah.
If you're hyped up thinking I can manifest this, or I can positive think my way to success, I guarantee you're going to be really unhappy with the results. I think of how many Thomas Edisons are out there today who could have his light bulb project fail over 1,000 times before he finally developed a light bulb that could work, that could be sold to consumers. And so that's part of the problem too. It goes back to what I was mentioning earlier about the power of accepting what is and being okay with failure. I love what Robert Kiyosaki has said in my show many times, is that, failure just showed me a way how not to do things. That's all.
The lesson. Yeah, it's a lesson.
That's right.
Agreed.
And if it becomes too easy, we become entitled, by the way. And that's ruinous for a person. Anything that becomes too easy begins to undermine our character.
That's a good point. My husband, actually, one of his favorite quotes is by Dr. King. The measures of a man, I don't want to mess it up. The greatness of a man isn't measured by, I guess, when things are good. That's what it means. But in times of, some type of I got, you know what I mean, though.
Yeah. I think the one I'm familiar with is by Lincoln. Lincoln said that, the true measure of man is not when times are difficult, but when times are easy. That's the real character of a man, isn't when times are difficult, but when times are easy. Because when we're difficult, we're all humble, at least long enough to get whatever we need, but it's in the time of abundance we begin to think, oh, this is all because of me. I did this, and really, again, it goes back. Amor fatis. I love the fates, love what is. In the end, hey, it's good right now. Doesn't mean I'm exceptional per se. It just means I'm being blessed at this time. I'm fortunate at this time, and things aren't going my way. I'm going to choose not to take it personally because that's happening to people all over the world at the exact same time. The power of average. We are so hyper about success, and we're exceptional, and those kind of things really set us up for a lot of psychological trauma and drama when things don't go our way, which is often the case. Not sometimes, often the case.
Yeah, that's another, as usual, great point and a great perspective that even I'm sure a lot of people haven't thought about. Even myself, that was very thought-provoking for me, because there's all that weight on showing up and being this way, being the first to do this, or being the best at that, or like you said, living in a cottage in the woods and fishing every day isn't exceptional, but that could be your sanctuary. And people making you feel, well, like that's not good enough. So I love the being content, being versus being happy, because if you're content, you're at ease. But chasing happiness can be so darn hard, and it makes you chase perfectionism at the same time, which is almost impossible.
Yes. Perfectionism is the enemy of good. It's often the enemy of good. And happiness. See, when we're pursuing happiness and find our circumstances don't make us happy, we begin to think there's something wrong with us.
Yes.
But the reality is that our circumstances just aren't working like we would prefer. Preference doesn't mean it's right. This is my preference. Who made me God to say this is my preference should be what is? That's why contentment is such a low bar, it seems. But how many people are really content?
That's a good question. That's a real good question that I want everyone to ask themselves when they hear this and really weigh those things. Your book is very affordable, 99 cents. Why did you make it that price point?
Because I wanted people to have no excuse for not reading it. And so, and also, I find if you give things away, we could have simply given it away at that price.
Yeah.
If you give something away, people tend to not value it. They tend to, discredit it. And so I wanted some cost there for them to make the decision. Never intended to make a living off of it. And guess what? I haven't. We really wanted it to be read. We wanted it easily available.
That's a good point. That's that, and that shows people as well. You've made it easy for them to not even make an excuse of why they can't get it. So
that's exactly
I really hope that everyone that listens today, that ever hears this podcast, checks that book out, because the type of knowledge, the perspective, and the skills that it will give you, the way to navigate through these things, to be able to digest and accept what's happening, I don't think you're going to find anywhere else. What other projects do we have to look forward to from Kevin Price?
Well, we're expanding into 3 more markets. We're in 16 now. We're about to add 3 more here. Waiting pretty much any day for when that's going to be finalized. We are continuing to do video advancement. We're growing more and more into the video space. We wanted to make it easier for people to find our content. We've been old school podcasts, old school radio for a long time. It's hard to make that transition when that's how you made your living for really 30 years for me. I did a different show, before this. And so we're working heavily in that spot. Continue expansions of our newsletter, working on more partnerships. And I have another book in the works. It's very early on. Mm-hmm. It's a 365 daily reader. It's going to be a daily reader type of approach that's going to address a lot of the things you and I have been talking about today, about success, about contentment, about rethinking things. I feel like we live in a very hyper-vigilant, incredibly uptight, very too high an expectation culture that frankly makes all of us miserable. In a way, it's going to be it's going to depend a lot on Stoic writing. I love the Stoics. The Stoics are really helpful. The Stoics had they abandon or don't have much of deference towards the idea of average. They are really exceptionally driven, but in a different way, not in a rah-rah way like we see from a lot of business people today. But it's still there, and I want people to get away from that. I want away from that. I want to encourage people to get away from that because, again, that's where exhaustion is. That's where not enough is. Most of us walk through life thinking, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. We hear that from the TV commercials, from our parents, from our friends, and certainly from social media, right?
I'm about to say social media made that times 10 for the new generations.
Absolutely. I'm glad I can't use any of that stuff. No, I'm joking. But and so my approach is really a kind of a daily guide to reality, basically.
Love that.
I think we are really Dr. Abraham Lowe wrote a great book in the 30s called Mental Health Through Will Training, or Through Training Your Will, rather. It's a phenomenal book. And in fact, a lot of people think he is the creator of cognitive behavioral therapy. And he said in that book in the 1930s, most people are romanto-intellectuals. They have romantic views of how the world is, and they use their intellect to defend those romantic notions they have. And he tried to encourage people then to line your values up with reality. Line your values with reality. And he says, try, fail, succeed, try, fail. But you treat it all as average. Your worth isn't measured by, I succeeded. It's measured a lot by your effort. He talks about a will to effort versus a will to comfort. Most of us tend to have a will to comfort. We like to blame younger generations, but frankly, I think I'm the world's oldest millennial at times. And so, comfort has always been a big priority to me. I'm really been very fortunate career-wise, considering how much stock I put in the easy way. And really, it's the harder way that makes us better people and we'll end up having more to show for it, which I eventually learned that, but it took a long time. So that's really what it's going to be about is a comforting reality check is what it is on a daily basis.
I love that. And I love that because I love that it keeps you humble because like one of the things I always say, it doesn't matter how much you obtain. The work is in maintaining, right? There's so much that goes into that part. And when we say maintaining, not just money, not just material things, but things like your honor, your integrity, and those things that you hear that people change, which goes great with your quote, when they start to get money. They're like, oh, these people changed, they're brand new, and that's because some people think that when people get money, it actually shows who they really are. And they were just waiting for that moment to be. But I love the reality check of, listen, this can all be taken away from you. And what are you outside of that? Yeah. Like, I love that keeping you humble and accountable. I'm excited about that.
And really, and to give yourself a break, right?
Yeah.
It is outside of our control. The Stoics daily pondered death every day. They, as a discipline, I don't care if you read Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, they all wrote in their writings about everyday ponder death. Because we came from the soil, we'll go back to the soil. And so when we get too wrapped up in what's happening now, or all the toys I can get at the end, what happens to those toys? Everyone's lining up trying to get them, right? And so just be reminded of your mortality. And it's not a negative thing. It's just a reminder that you might want to choose to be content and enjoy what's happening now rather than future tripping all the time.
I love that. Tell the people where they can find you. Where's the best place to find you or get in contact with you?
I think priceofbusiness.com is really probably the best place. Also at Twitter at Kevin Price Live, which was my first show was called Kevin Price Live, and somehow we just kept the name as time went by for that account. But priceofbusiness.com, there's ways of contacting there. But I engage quite a bit at Twitter, and so feel free to reach out there as well.
Okay, and this brings me to one of my favorite parts of the show. It's a trivia part. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and what resonates to you the most authentically, give us that answer and tell us why.
Okay.
So the first one is, what is your favorite book, or the book that you would say impacted you the most?
Oh, man, it's so hard. I mean, my greatest love is books. I'm a bibliophile, so it's a hard one. I'm going to try to say one because I hate it when people name four or five and they've been asked one. But I will have to say it's tempered by where my thinking is right now.
Mhm.
And it's probably Mental Health Through Training Your Will by Dr. Abraham Lowe. I read it a few years ago, but it's something I find in my toolbox a lot when I get frustrated with reality. Um, you know, we don't want to love what is. We don't like radical acceptance. And those are the things that are making us miserable. We are not God. We're not omniscient. We're not omnipotent. And so Dr. Lowe's work reminds me that Africa is an incredibly peaceful place.
Love that. Love that. What is your favorite go-to song when you have to be like uplifted on your hard days, and you need that song to keep you going?
That's a good one. I like really positive music.
Mm-hmm.
I like people like El Jarreau. I like Bill Withers.
Mm-hmm.
I think one that immediately comes to mind is the song by El Jarreau, "Hello, Mr. Radio." Hello, everything's fine in my mind. Which, by the way, is actually a very Stoic statement because we have that will, that power to reframe things. We don't have to be a victim of our thoughts, but instead we can be owners of our thoughts. And that song reinforces that idea. I'm fine in my mind. Well, how does that happen? I will that to happen. So I like music that has a King Harvest, Dancing in the Moonlight, although I don't dance unless my pants are on fire. But I like music with a positive beat and something uplifting. And so I spend most of my day listening to music. There's probably 6 hours a day I'm listening to music while working. It's in my background. But I purposefully go to music for a part of the day that is specifically uplifting to just really enjoy, to have fun.
I love that. I love that, especially coming from a music production background. I love that. It's such a strong positive reinforcement that people don't utilize as much as they could, or the way that you're utilizing it. So I love that. My last question is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Wow. Another really tough one. So the first one,
I love this part.
To be honest, the first one that came to mind was Solomon from Proverbs. As a man thinketh, so is he.
Yes.
As a man thinketh, so is he. And so I think I'm a failure. Oh, guess what? You're a failure. Good job there. Yeah, I think I'm successful. Yeah, you know, quantify that. Show yourself where that is. You know, I think I'm content. That's great. I think I'm miserable. Oh, that's a sad thing to think about yourself, because you're going to make that true. And so, as a man thinketh, so is he. Or a woman. Man was anthros, when the way the Hebrew was written was anthros, it was mankind. So as a person thinketh, so is he or she.
Absolutely. Those were all great choices. I loved every last one of them. Kevin, it was great to have you as usual. It was great to talk to you. I definitely want you back, especially when that second book hits stores. And thank you for coming. And do you have anything else you want to add before you go?
Just feel free to check us out at priceofbusiness.com and Kevin Price Live at Twitter.
Okay, Kevin. Thanks for coming, and it was nice seeing you again. Talk to you soon.
You too. Always. Thank you.
Okay, my Clovers, stay tuned. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. What's up, my Clovers? Welcome back from that short commercial break. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. As I always tell you, I bring people on here that make you think about things in a different way. They invoke provoking thoughts, and they don't just do that, but they give you tools, they give you resources, they give you perspective. And I really hope you guys got those jewels today. But if you haven't, let's recap. Kevin spoke about contentness. That was just so refreshing, because so many times we as a people, just as human beings, we put so much pressure on ourselves that it's unreal. And, having this conversation over and over about making sure that you're not just living, but that you feel alive, that part is so essential. Being content, having time to say, you know what, let me not focus on this too long because we're good and I'm good enough with being good. Great, perfect, immaculate. All those things are going to take up too much from this life experience. So I love that he spoke about that. And for so many people who may have tried a lot of books and the books didn't work for them, it's not that you can't do these things. It's just that you can't do them yet. So I love that his book addresses that. It's like that prerequisite for school, right? You got to be able to take this, get that information, be equipped with those resources so that now I can show up to this class and I can ace it. So, for those of you who thought that, listen, these things don't work for me, that's another perspective, that maybe it's not that it didn't work for me, but I didn't prepare myself to do the work to be able to receive it and execute it. And last but not least, I love the quote. The quote was so on point, because there's so many times that we weigh success in material thwe and within those material things, it makes us feel like we're better than people, or that because we don't have those material things, we don't have the same value as other people. And it's in those times when you really see the true nature of who people are. And I urge you guys, and I challenge you to reflect on those things about yourself. Make sure that you're showing up here and that you're living, because that's a part of success, that balance. Make sure that you're not packing too much on the plate. And packing too much on the plate doesn't necessarily mean that you have different things. It could be that one thing that you're overstacking. So please, 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 please digest those jewels. I recapped a lot of them for you, but there were other jewels in there that I want you to find for yourself. And until next time, Clovers, if you like the episode, press that like button, follow, subscribe, tell a friend to tell a friend, and peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Committed to Success podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast, share, and tell a friend. Rate and review, and join us next time. Check out the show notes on the website for links to everything that was mentioned in this episode. For all upcoming events, services, and products, visit CloéLuv.com.